President Trump had his first face-to-face meeting with German Chancellor Angela Merkel today. The relationship had been a bit strained since the campaign when Mr. Trump accused the Chancellor of ruining Germany with the influx of refugees. At a joint press conference this afternoon, the president defended his agenda to protect the U.S. from radical Islamic terror.
Our two countries must continue to work together to protect our people from radical Islamic terrorism and to defeat ISIS. We also recognize that immigration security is national security. We must protect our citizens from those who seek to spread terrorism, extremism, and violence inside our borders. Immigration is a privilege, not a right, and the safety of our citizens must always come first, without question.
Merkel defended her commitment to helping refugees despite the threat posed to her country.
We have to protect our external borders and there we have to work on the basis of mutual interest with our neighbors. Migration, immigration, integration has to be worked on. Obviously, traffickers have to be stopped, but this has to be done by looking at the refugees as well, giving them opportunities to shape their own lives where they are, help countries who right now are not in an ability to do so, sometimes because they have civil war. I think that's the right way of going about it.
Okay, well, a lot of discussion, people saying, how did this go today, Dana, between the president and Angela Merkel, saying perhaps it was a little bit strained over these issues of refugees.
It could have been, but I do think it could have been more strained. I mean, there's some talk that he ignored her request for a handshake. I'd like to believe that he just didn't hear the request and that was just an awkward moment. But I don't think anyone will dwell on it. And I think this continues the introduction of several of world leaders that come to the White House to meet the president. This is actually important for her back home. So one of the things I like to do when you think about a joint session like this is not what they were trying to accomplish together, which I think today was just establishing a personal relationship, because they will have to work together on several issues. But if you think about their domestic audience, in particular her, so she is facing a pretty tough re-election. She's been in office for a long time. There's interest in a guy named Schultz, who is running a very anti-Trump campaign. Now, he's not bound by any of the restrictions of office as she is. So she's like, I have to be the leader of this country. And I think that this visit showed back home for her domestic audience that she is the mature adult, the right politician to be able to have a relationship with the United States and to figure out a way to keep Germany in the forefront of the EU. So domestically for her, I think it was good, and for the president, just fine.
Just fine. Okay. So, Eric, what did you make of the interaction between the two, and do you think any progress made?
I don't know if there's any progress made. I don't think there was any pushback at all. I think I agree with Dana. It was a very matter-of-fact, very kind of formal feeling type of meeting. I think the two themes that have really defined Donald Trump's candidacy and presidency, anti-globalism and pro-economic nationalism, were front and center. If you listen to not only the comments President Trump made, but also the answers to some of the questions, he hit on two big things. For me, I heard something very important when he was talking about trade. He said he's a fair trader and a free trader. But right before that, he said something that really caught my attention. He said reciprocal trade policies. And the point I'm trying to pull out here is the reciprocal part. If you go into some of these other countries, they talk China, Brazil, Cuba, European Union, we pay massive amounts of money to put our products into those countries. They don't have that same onerous burden to put their products into ours. So the reciprocal word he threw in there means it's a heads up. And Dana and I have talked about this for a while, about how they're going to administer a border tax to pay for some of these things. That may be the first shot across the bow of these countries saying, hey, if you're charging us, China, 3.4%, you may get charged that same 3.4% to bring your stuff back in here. Brazil, 8.3%. The other one, very quickly, that's trade. Also security. You know, we talk about NATO. The U.S., the alleged requirement under NATO is that 2% of your GDP as a NATO country you're supposed to spend on defense. Right. Germany happens to spend only about 1.2% of their GDP on defense, so they're going to need to get their funding of NATO up. The United States does 3%. France, Germany, and Turkey are below the 2%. Italy, Belgium, Spain, Hungary, and a couple others are below 1%. So in order for security, the world, if they want us to continue to play by the NATO rules, needs to step up.
And that's something he talked about during his campaign. I get Greg and Juan in now, but the president fielded a question from a German reporter about his America First agenda and pushed back against the perception in Europe that he is pursuing isolationist policies.
I don't believe in an isolationist policy, but I also believe a policy of trade should be a fair policy. And the United States has been treated very, very unfairly by many countries over the years, and that's going to stop. But I'm not an isolationist. I'm a free trader, but I'm also a fair trader. I don't know what newspaper you're reading, but I guess that would be another example of, as you say, fake news.
Oh, my God. Never misses a chance. Never misses a chance. Okay, Greg, what do you make of this?
Well, I have 2 points to raise. Let's talk about the trade thing. Germany makes amazing cars. Let's be honest, some of the greatest cars in the world. Guess where they make a lot of them?
Here.
Here. They make 400,000 of them in South Carolina, which is amazing.
I do like a nice Mercedes.
Yes, and the trade deficit is deceptive. Reciprocity is hard when you have a population of 80 million people, and America is 4 times larger with 320 million. Our GDP is 17 trillion. Their GDP is 3.73 trillion. Thank you, Wikipedia. You're welcome, Greg. So the key distinction here when you're talking about deficits is you've got to look at size and why the deficit really isn't as important as they make it out to be. And free trade does matter. Germany helps our country. There's 750,000 American jobs because of German companies in the United States. Now on to this stuff about...
Can I just address that before you go on to the next one? But if you threaten to say to China, you're charging us 3.4%, we're going to charge you 3.4%, maybe you get them to lower it. Maybe you get it down to the global average of 2.5%, and you save American corporations putting products into China a boatload of money.
But Eric, I was looking at Germany on Wikipedia, not on China.
Germany.
Look during the break.
I want to talk about the...
then Juanito.
The migration thing. We keep positioning this argument as you're either pro or anti-refugee, and it's not fair because we are pro-refugee. We're just pro-refugee wisely. You know, Trump looks at Germany and says, we can't do all that. It's like when you look at a friend of yours who gets married and gains a lot of weight. Oh, wow, he really let himself go. We're not going to let ourselves go. We as a country cannot let ourselves go. We watched in the migrant process, we watched Germany essentially let itself go, and it's going to take a long time for that to change. So I think that Angela, I'm still not sure, lecturing or talking about refugees, to us is like, you know, Hillary lecturing you about winning, or her husband lecturing you about keeping his pants up. This is not, it's not her place to tell us because they're dealing with a huge problem.
Low refugee diet?
Yes.
Exactly.
Well,
Okay,
actually, we're Slim Jim compared to Germany.
Oh, definitely.
We don't let them. I mean, they've let millions in, so for their smaller population, proportionately, they have done a great deal, and they see it as a mercy mission. They do not see it as...
But why do they do that?
There are some who do.
Because they feel guilty about the past.
Well, that's arguable.
So, yeah.
That's
Ask
possible.
their
It's also possible that they see this in a way that I think we need to shift, which is that they're bringing younger people in who are willing and able to stir their economic engine.
Or just stir literally pots.
No, I don't think so.
Because they're looking for young people to take care of older people.
Well, that's right. If you look at it in terms of Social Security, I thought you were saying stir trouble, but I don't think...
No, I mean like actually cook.
Okay, all right. And I think it's the similar thing in response to what Eric was saying. You got to worry that the other side, Eric, punches back and says, oh, you guys want a trade war? We're glad to... So in terms of what...
to trade war with us.
Oh, that's right. Oh, nobody. We're so powerful.
But this
is what Greg was talking about. If you look at BMW, you look at Siemens, guess what? Those are companies that employ Americans and export overseas from the United States. There's benefit there. I think the key thing about this meeting...
A German car built in America exported to Germany isn't charged the import.
I'm telling you, it's exported all over the world, and it's the benefit because we get the jobs. And I mean, I thought this was the jobs president. So I think he needs to think through. It's not just a one-way street. But the reason I thought this meeting was so interesting is that, you know, you listen to Trump, and it's all about this kind of populist, nationalist, the kind of things we've been hearing about. And this week you had, in the Dutch election, Geert Wilders, who is, you know, the Trump of the Netherlands, lose. And then you have, you know, I guess in France, Marine Le Pen is coming up. But right now, the message that's being sent is that populist energy seems to be fading. And by the way, in terms of Angela Merkel herself, it seems like her chances of re-election, picking up on what Dana was talking about, are growing.
Have you seen the cover of The Economist?
No.
The cover of The Economist has the exact opposite thesis, that globalism is on its way down,
right,
and economic nationalism around
the
world
that's
is on
clear.
its way. And they're using hot air balloons, lifting all these countries that are deciding to pull back on these trade agreements and focus solely within their own borders.
Well, clearly Germany is not pulling back on trade agreements. In fact, the Germans, right before this meeting with Donald Trump, they were talking to the Chinese about building new relationships to replace the U.S.
You use one example,
No, I'm just citing.
And then you claim Marine Le Pen is on her way down. We don't know yet.
Well, there's
No,
also
we
another
don't. But I
candidate
know
on the
for a
rise
fact what happened to
in
Gert
Denmark.
Wilders.
That's a
Correct.
populist
We
as
would
well.
agree with that.
Okay, Dana.
Well, I just think that one of the things where Merkel and Trump could possibly agree on the refugee issue is the key to this is actually solving the refugee problem at its source. And President Trump has said that he'd like to see something about some safe zones in Syria or something. And all of those countries Eric mentioned that are part of NATO, everybody has a national interest in helping solve this problem because they're exporting terror from that region. They're not only exporting terror, but they're leaving many people desperate and hopeless. So people who have big hearts, they want to bring them into their countries because they care, but then there's a security risk. And the solution to it is to solve it at its source. And somebody like Merkel and Trump together as a partnership leading NATO in May at their meeting could actually be very helpful.
Yeah, it would be a very strong alliance, and perhaps this was the first step towards that because they really needed to meet in person.
So let me just quickly add on to that I think I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to hear them talk about Vladimir Putin, because I think Merkel has a view of Putin and she has experience with Putin, especially in terms of the Ukraine, the sanctions alike, very different from Donald Trump.
Well, we happen to be able to get in Russia in the A block.